connect before you direct, like, shouting at someone when they're in an unregulated state really hardly ever is effective. And it's always about trying to help someone bring them down to a calm, controlled, state of mind. And then you can talk through their behaviour or what they're feeling or whatever's happening.
Welcome to All Aboard, where we help parents navigate the ADHD journey. Whether you're at the beginning of this journey asking what now, or you've trodden this path for a while and are wondering what's next, All Aboard ADHD is here for you. We will bring you key information from expert interviews alongside parents sharing their real-life lived experience to help you feel less alone. I'm Claire, and today we'll be talking to parent guest Emily Snape. Emily is a children's author, illustrator, educator, and mum to 3 children who give her lots of inspiration for stories. Her journey in ADHD started when her son began the process of receiving his ADHD diagnosis. She now regularly works with young people, celebrating and supporting their amazing, creative, neurodivergent minds. Emily's work has appeared online, on television, in shops, and even on buses. She loves coffee and notebooks and is here to share her ADHD parenting story with us today. Welcome aboard, Emily.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. So my 8-year-old daughter and I have been reading your beautiful book, My Amazing ADHD Brain, at bedtime, and I can't wait to chat to you about this today. So please, can you begin by telling us a bit about yourself and your children and your journey with ADHD?
Well, I live in London. I've got 3 kids and a partner who has ADHD. He was diagnosed in his 50s. So at the same sort of time as we were discovering that my son, who at that time was probably about 11, had ADHD, was going through the process of trying to work out why he was finding particular things difficult. And we went through sort of different routes. So that was interesting because his dad's diagnosis and my son's diagnosis kind of happened at the same time. And we went on a massive learning curve.
That is a big learning curve, both happening simultaneously. So I'm guessing that inspired you to write My Amazing ADHD Brain. How does it relate to your personal experiences as a parent of a son with ADHD and your partner?
I've been working in children's books and education, for the last 20 years. I've always been interested in trying to help kids and discuss problems with kids. And so a lot of my books have been dealing with things that are tricky and then trying to find a humorous, engaging way to explore them. So I was already writing some books with Summersdale about mindfulness and positivity and resilience. And then at that time when I was doing that, Finn, who's my son, was having all these difficulties and we were kind of getting our heads around what ADHD meant. And I suppose I went on this massive journey of head diving into podcasts and books and any kind of information I could find so that I could support him as much as possible. And that, I realized there was kind of a need for more books that perhaps you could share with your child. So not really for the parents, because there's so much out there and it's changing all the time. But I suppose just so you can get those conversations going with your child. If you think they have ADHD, maybe their best friend has ADHD or a sibling or, lots of different situations where it's helpful to have a tangible book that you can kind of start conversations with that's really positive and fun and hopefully a child would, want to pick up and have a look at that can, just get those conversations started.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation to have, isn't it? Because actually only today someone spoke to me about their daughter who's going through the diagnostic process and she wanted to know or have some advice in terms of when I started that conversation with my son, and that's something I did from day one. But I do think you're right, there isn't a huge amount of information at an age appropriate level to start or guide you through that process. So I think your book is massively valuable in that sense. And with your own son, when he was being diagnosed, what were the early signs or behaviours that might have led you to suspect he had ADHD in the first instance?
I mean, now looking back, and now I know so much more about ADHD, I can kind of see things that would fit into what you might describe as ADHD behaviour. But it wasn't really, no one at school, none of his teachers really pinpointed it as ADHD. It was really when he got to year 6, so he was 10, turning 11. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
A couple of years ago. And I think just a lot of the stuff that happened to Finn was a lot of friendship troubles. That I think year 6 is a tricky year for lots of kids because you've got friends that have been together a long time, and then they're splitting off for different secondary schools. And there was like exam pressure with SATs, and the way his school dealt with SATs was in quite a serious way that wasn't super helpful. It was really all about grammar to a mad point, I think, personally. There was a lot of pressure going on. He really struggled in year 6 from those two things, and he was getting so anxious that he was school refusing. And yeah, we started to realize that he wasn't really regulating his emotions in the same way that maybe his peers were, and that was really awful for him. He was really struggling, and he was struggling at school, and he was really going up against teachers and not backing down in a way that obviously his teachers needed him to, so I was getting regular calls that he was not behaving in class, that he was being sent out, that he was being sent home, he didn't want to wear the school uniform anymore. Like, he really went into a kind of crisis point. And so that was when it was like, okay, let's work out how we can do things differently. And I was nervous that maybe getting a diagnosis, whatever it was going to lead to, would be somehow a problem for him, like a label, that it wouldn't be helpful. But I could definitely wouldn't share with any parents that are sort of at the beginning of this journey. The best thing was getting his diagnosis, like, without a doubt.
Oh, it's so great to hear you say that. I think people listening will find such value in that too, because if you are at the beginning of that journey, I think everybody shares those fears because you don't want to label your child, but actually labeling them, I found, can be very positive because it can help not only them understand their brain, but then it gives you the opportunity to educate others around you, whether that's peers and friends or teachers, to help understand their needs and what accommodations are necessary to help them thrive. And particularly, you mentioned school there, and I think that's a really common issue, isn't it? Children just get massively overwhelmed. How did the experiences that you had with your son influence the themes and messages that are now in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's all inspired by Finn, and I think just trying to remember that there's a positive spin you can take on everything. Like, you can get, way down in thinking, oh, I find this difficult. But actually, you think about it in a sort of different twist, actually, that a lot of the things that people with ADHD might discover is that they have these traits that they share, but they also could be considered as superpowers and super strengths. Like, everyone has this. And if you try and look at something, actually, how it can benefit you, how you can like harness those skills rather than fighting them, they can actually be really helpful. And I think that reframing really helped Finn go in and thinking, yeah, okay, I'm actually, there's some things I'm really good at. Yeah, there's some things that I find challenging, and I can work out how to, navigate those. But I also have strengths that I'm really proud of that could be having ADHD. I'm lucky, just being proud of your brain. We've all got different brains. We've all got different skills, and just trying to really own that and not feel like you're different or that it's somehow worse, because it really isn't.
No, I think you've done that so successfully as well. It's a really strength-focused book, which is just beautiful because it has the ability, as you say, to help children reframe. And yeah, we know all the challenges that we're facing, but how do we look at all the positives? And at the same time, you weave in lots of kind of tips and educational things alongside it. And I have a son who's 13 and he has an ADHD diagnosis. He was diagnosed when he was 6.5. And I strongly suspect that my daughter does, although she's not yet diagnosed, because obviously she's a girl that has its own challenges. But she's been reading your book to me at bedtime. And when I tucked her in last night and we'd finished reading the book, she said to me, "Mum, Pip sounds just like me. I think I've got ADHD too."
Wow, that's great.
It was, honestly, it was really amazing to hear her embrace her brain, because I think obviously she's grown up in an ADHD family, in an ADHD environment, and she has an understanding of that, and she sees it in her brother. And I've always had that awareness of the likelihood of her having it. But to have read this book with her, or rather her read it to me, and see herself reflected back again and again and again, and actually embrace that, was just such a beautiful moment.
That's so good. That's so great to hear. That makes it all worthwhile. Yeah. That's it. Because once you think, oh, hey, maybe that, maybe they are talking about me, that's great. Like, yeah, because it is really positive.
It is. And so, yeah, thank you for writing it, because as you said right at the beginning of this conversation, having that as a resource for children that's child friendly, that's age appropriate, that allows them to see themselves is just, well, I could tell you firsthand that was quite a powerful moment for me, because she was choosing to embrace that. So going back to your own son, when he was diagnosed with ADHD, obviously you said that he was 11, he'd been having lots of challenges. What were your initial thoughts and feelings getting that diagnosis?
By the time we managed to get through the diagnosis, it felt, it wasn't really a surprise that they came back saying, yes, he's got ADHD. And the race I had was wanting to get that diagnosis confirmed before he transitioned to secondary school. Because I wanted to, he is at a secondary school that's very big, and I knew things were, he was going to maybe find some things difficult, and I wanted to have everything in place that I could and understand what the school could offer. And I wanted that official diagnosis so that the school would take seriously. And it was really helpful to go in knowing that we had that. And then once your child has an ADHD diagnosis, then you can work with the Senko team and see what they can offer. And I don't know, I imagine it's harder if it's more like, if you haven't got that official diagnosis, it's probably trickier to have those conversations. It depends on the school, I'm sure. But yeah, it was definitely good going in with that confidence.
And how does My Amazing ADHD Brain help children understand what an ADHD diagnosis means for them?
Well, I hope that it makes because like you said, it's got some tips. So maybe it will come up with some things that maybe you think, oh yeah, that is tricky. Like maybe friendship stuff can be a bit tricky, or maybe taking turns. I do find that hard. And I can see why maybe my friends get a bit annoyed when I'm not so great at, or, things like that, perhaps that might ring a bell. And then you think, okay, that's something I share with other people. And then this is how they navigate those problems, like practicing taking turns by playing loads of board games at home with your family, so that when you're then playing a board game at school or a game at school, maybe you can kind of remember some of those skills. So hopefully that there's a few takeaways there, and just feeling not like you're alone, I guess, because I think feeling different and then, not feeling like you're the same as your group of friends, that's a really horrible and anxious feeling. And it's important for everybody to, build on their self-esteem and feel confident. So I think hopefully that feeling of community and that you share things with other people.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, even at a parent level, that's why I created this podcast, because I know how alone I felt and I never wanted another parent to go through that. But sometimes we forget about what that's like for children and how they feel going through this very alone. So it's beautiful to have this character that they can almost develop their understanding of themselves alongside in your book. So you were talking about school there. How has ADHD impacted your son's education now, in particular that he's transitioned to secondary school? What accommodations have you found to be beneficial and helpful for him?
Well, I don't know if it'd be interesting hearing what your son, and because they're the same age. So my son's in year 8 now, so he's just about to turn 13. And I guess one of the most useful things he has at secondary school is like a pass where he can go out of the classroom if he's feeling overwhelmed or fidgety. And that he has definitely found helpful. And we did get to a point where the school decided he was abusing it, and it all got a bit tense, because I guess in their eyes, he, and you have to then as a parent, kind of press a bit harder, and they took it away the right for him to use this card. But the card has been helpful. And what other things have they done? Just being really understanding. Like, we've had a bit of a family crisis at the moment, and Finn, who normally I spend a lot of time with, has had to sort of cope with not getting as much attention, and he really struggled at school. My daughter's been in hospital, and Finn struggled, and this is pretty dramatic, but he absconded school. Like, he jumped over the gate a couple of weeks ago, and the school were very cross and dealt with it like he was a truant. And they rang me up while I was in the hospital. Your son's jumped over the fence and he's gone. And I went into a major panic, because I didn't know if he was coming to us, like if he was going to try and get a bus, or what he was thinking. When I was able to then communicate with the school, and just remind them of Finn's needs and that he needs to feel safe, they were a lot more understanding. He didn't get excluded. He didn't get in the trouble. They were quite sensitive. And I just sometimes have to remind them that Finn does have troubles with impulsivity and emotional regulation. And when I do that, they are quite good, but they do, because it's a big school, they do sometimes forget. So I guess you just have to keep reminding school, keep talking to teachers, keep helping, the conversations going of what your child needs. And yeah, I have found the school to be quite responsive. They need reminding sometimes.
I think there is a tendency for schools to forget that ADHD isn't just about sitting, or an inability, for example, to sit in a chair. And actually what lies beneath the surface is a lot of emotional dysregulation and overwhelm and anxiety. And often interventions aren't just about where they sit in the classroom or having chunked into information. It is, as you said, the passes, although it's just mind-blowing that something is there to help a child that gets taken away from them. But those ramps, as they often get referred to, are so crucial to support their well-being and their mental health, alongside the kind of scaffolding and structuring in the classroom as well. They are just so important, and you can't really have one without the other, or you run the risk, as you say, of a tendency of almost punishing symptoms of somebody's brain, which is just really heartbreaking.
Yeah. And I find with Finn, and I don't know if other parents with children with ADHD would say this, but the more Finn feels pushed into a corner or not heard, the worse he behaves. And if he actually feels listened to and understood, and if he gets the chance to explain his rationale or why he feels wronged, or he can then help to regulate himself and will be able to be quite articulate about it. So yeah, I think it's just reminding teachers of that whole connect before you direct. Like, shouting at someone when they're in an unregulated state really hardly ever is effective, and it's always about trying to help someone bring them down to a calm, controlled state of mind. And then you can talk through their behavior or what they're feeling or whatever's happening.
So yeah, connect before you direct is a beautifully simple analogy, isn't it? Because I think very often the connection, the most important bit, is the bit that gets forgotten. So Pip, your lovely character in your book, what tips does he give for helping children in school?
I think Pip finds having a fidget box really helpful, which a lot of schools will accommodate, and that's having some sort of fun squishy toys or things like perhaps a pad and pencil that you can draw on if your child's feeling a bit restless and needing to focus. One of Pip's other tips is perhaps thinking about playtime and how to cope when you feel a bit hot-headed, because I think playtime can be a really tricky time of the day. And so it's just trying to encourage children to recognize that they're feeling hot-headed and maybe coming across as argumentative, and maybe trying to remind them that in that moment to try and work on self-regulation and tips to calm down and relax and regulate their breathing, so then they can go in and explain why this isn't fair or this isn't appropriate behavior. So I think I'd say trying to work on that hot-headed feeling is really helpful in school when there's so much going on, especially at playtime.
Yeah, playtime is a difficult one, isn't it? And I think what's lovely about the book is those tips. It's almost like an introduction to coaching. I'm an ADHD coach and I coach children and tweens and teens, and it's all about building their skills. And actually your Pip's tips, they're lovely because they're very age appropriate tips to get kids to start thinking about skills and how they can start to manage some of the challenges of having ADHD. I heard the other day one which I thought was lovely, and that all it does is it just takes 3 deep breaths to have the difference between pause and an impulse. And I thought that's really nice, because even very young children, that's just such a simple thing to remember, just 3 deep breaths. And it's just enough.
One of Pip's tips is to try and, when you're feeling anxious, is to try and breathe as if you're blowing up a balloon. So you breathe in through your nose and then, with a bit of pressure out through your mouth as if it's a balloon. So I guess that's kind of a accessible way to remember how to try and release those anxious breaths.
Yeah, a very visual and a very playful one for children as well, which is a lovely way for them to be able to remember it. I think your book on the whole has, as we said, has just got a beautiful focus of strength and positivity, which is just so important for children's self-esteem. So can you share a particular success story or a memorable moment or a unique strength that has made you proud as the parent of a son with ADHD?
I mean, I guess the way that, as I mentioned, we're having this family crisis. It's been a lot of pressure on everyone, but I suppose the compassion I can see from my son and his ability to, just try and create that joy in every day. I'm really proud. It's not been a smooth, I wouldn't say, every moment's been smooth and perfect, but I think, when you take away the sort of hot-headed moments and it's more the compassionate understanding, I am so proud of how this is something that comes from being 13, and you might not find a child who's a lot younger being able to do this, but I recognize like the maturity and the compassion in which he's dealing with like our family crisis has definitely made me proud.
Actually, we talk about emotional dysregulation with children with ADHD, but we don't often focus on the other side of things. And that's just how amazingly compassionate and kind and empathetic they can be as well. I mean, my son, who's the same age as yours, has always just been incredible with younger children. The patience and love and kindness that he's able to demonstrate with them really just shows why it's so important to celebrate our children's strengths and build their self-esteem around that.
Definitely. And I obviously, you don't know. I've got a son who's older and everyone's obviously an individual, but the kind of cuddles I get from my 13-year-old who has ADHD, I don't know if that's an ADHD trait or, just a Finn trait. But the sort of physical contact, he is always like stroking my hair and being physical. That's something he's always like tactile moments, like sensory moments. And that, when times are tough, getting cuddles from your teenager are precious.
Oh, they are so precious. My son's exactly the same. I do wonder maybe it is an ADHD thing. I'm not sure if you watched the last series of I'm a Celebrity with Sam Thompson, who's got ADHD. And when he cuddles his friends in camp, he absolutely launches himself on them and wraps around them. That's my son too.
Right. And my older son, he's lovely, but he will not give me the same kind of massive cuddles.
Yeah, they're cuddles with every inch of their body and love. And I just think they're to be absorbed and enjoyed, because one day they might not be so forthcoming.
Yeah.
So why do you think it is so helpful or important for children with ADHD to celebrate their strengths? Because that feels like the real purpose of your book.
I think having a sense of yourself and being proud to be yourself, knowing that you're unique and owning it and not wanting to be like anybody else, and knowing, you're the only person that can be you, and to hold that and try and embrace it is the only way forward, really, because we spend so much of our life wishing we were taller, shorter, curly hair, straight, whatever it is. And it's hard, isn't it? Growing up is really tricky. And so the more proud you can be and more embrace who you are, I think the easier it is to then have fun and enjoy yourself and learn and thrive. So I think self-esteem is really tricky. We all doubt ourselves, it's a problem everyone deals with, is confidence, but trying to embrace who you are and recognize your strengths is really helpful in then being resilient and keep going and finding joy in life.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think self-esteem is everything. And I think if we can build our children's self-esteem through having a positive sense of self, then we can really guide them through to a stage where beyond school, they get to thrive in the adult world.
And it's hard. And it's hard, like, the parents listening to this podcast, they're all going to be parents who really want to help their children. Already, their kids are going to be fine, because really, if you have unconditional love from someone, that's really all you need. I think, not all you need. Life then throws terrible things at us and makes things tricky, and they have to deal with other people at school, which have got other problems and other things going on. But yeah, like as a gift, you can give that unconditional love you can give as a parent is like so helpful and essential in helping your child thrive and be nurtured. And
so for the parents listening, on that lovely closing note,
the fact that they're engaging and thinking, okay, my child's got ADHD or I've got ADHD, what can I do? Like that's it. They're going to be fine. Like they're embracing it. And like you said, I think having a community, knowing other parents are going through similar challenges is super helpful for parents and for the children, not to feel like you're alone, because there's lots of people going through all sorts of things, and you can find your tribe and they can share jokes and moments and success stories and tips. I've discovered there are like WhatsApp groups where I live where people will discuss where you can get the ADHD medication when it runs out, or like just a community of people all chipping in, recommending great ADHD coaches. I didn't even know an ADHD coach was a thing, and I'm now definitely going to be checking out your details because I didn't know that, and I'm thinking, oh right, that would be really helpful. So it's just the more communication you have with other people who can open up doors for you and make you realise that there's loads of help out there and inspiration and stories.
We're all in this together.
Yes.
Emily, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today and for your beautiful book, My Amazing ADHD Brain. We will share all the details in the show notes for parents listening to go and get themselves a copy for their children and for school as well, actually, because I think it's a great opportunity for children and for teachers to be able to help educate others in the classroom as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you'd like to buy a copy of Emily's My Amazing ADHD Brain picture book for your children or for school, then please do check out our show notes below for more information. Or if you'd like to find out about how I can help support you and your children with personalised ADHD coaching, then please do head to allaboardadhd.com. You can also find me on Instagram at allaboardadhd. Most importantly, if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please can you follow and review All Aboard to help other parents find this podcast and welcome them aboard our journey too. Thank you for listening to All Aboard ADHD.